Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Last big week before Christmas break, Dennis.
Yes.
There's no let-up in the local government news. I think I remember a time when things had substantially wound down by this point, but that's just not the case anymore, is it?
No, you're absolutely right, Helen. There are a number of trends that I've noted in preparing the bulletin over this year. Quite a lot of new stuff. Busy as ever and more so, it seems.
Absolutely. Well, let's make an immediate start then, Dennis. What are we going to kick off with?
Well, yes, I'm going to turn to the latest guidance on mayoral development corporations because the government has updated its guidance on the legislation, responsibilities and governance of mayoral development corporations. The refreshed document published on Friday, the 5th of December, now includes details of clarifying the roles of mayors in appointing chairs and guidance on dealing with liabilities that may remain following the closure of subsidiary companies.
Well, this guidance, and people should take a look at it. It clarifies the legislation that enables a mayor of a county or combined county authority to establish a mayoral development corporation. And it explains how legislation relates to relevant provisions on overview and scrutiny.
Indeed, and it sets out the various pieces of legislation. It's very useful. It sets out the various pieces of legislation, how they work together, and setting out the mayor's responsibilities and what the carrying out of those responsibilities actually means for governance arrangements. And it also provides new advice on the role and responsibilities of mayoral combined and combined county authority officers, and updates the list of statutory instruments conferring mayoral development corporation functions on combined authorities and combined county authorities.
Yeah, and it also clarifies the legislation in respect of mayoral development corporations um, around oversight, reserve matters, and consent. And it explains how the relevant legislation operates. And it also sets out how to manage any stranded liabilities. That's an interesting one. Stranded liabilities
Yes.
on the closure of subsidiary companies.
Yes, exactly. And the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government issued the first iteration of the guidance in April this year in response to a recommendation made in the Tees Valley Independent Review Report. Now, if I remember, Helen, a former LLG president was involved in the preparation of that report, Quintin Baker, I believe. Now, the 2024 report, which revealed a series of governance concerns at the Tees Valley Combined Authority and the South Tees Development Corporation, called on the government to clarify the regulations on combined authorities and development corporations, including oversight, as you say, reserved matters, consent, and those stranded liabilities.
Yeah. So we've got an actual response to recommendations previously made,
Mm,
Dennis,
yeah,
which is good to see. Um,
progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn to other news. The LGA has developed a guide in response to interest from councillors seeking support in approaching and countering disinformation. Now, this guide sets out the key definitions and tangible actions councillors can take to respond effectively to disinformation. It's worth noting that the LGA has also provided a guide for officers. The two complement each other, so I would recommend everybody reads them in tandem, actually.
Well, Helen, disinformation isn't new, of course, but its scale, speed, and sophistication have changed dramatically, as we know. Councillors are increasingly on the front line of online debate, community reassurance, and public trust. And the LGA guide offers a clear, practical framework for navigating a landscape where, as we know, false information can spread faster than facts.
Yeah, this really is something people have to sit up
Mm.
and address. Um, some of the key themes shaping the LGA's message include disinformation being very different from misinformation, and the LGA make the point strongly that that distinction matters. So there should be a sharp line between misinformation, which is false information shared without harmful intent, and disinformation, which is false
Mm.
information created or shared deliberately to mislead, manipulate, or cause harm. Now, for councillors, this distinction is crucial because in terms of how you respond to it, because misinformation often needs gentle correction and community engagement. Disinformation, however, is strategic and it can be targeted at undermining democratic institutions in order to sow division or damage reputations.
And the LGA, Helen, is absolutely clear. Councils and councillors are increasingly exposed to disinformation campaigns. These may focus on matters such as contentious planning decisions, public health measures, local service changes, elections and democratic processes, and, of course, personal attacks on councillors.
Yeah, absolutely. And trust in local councillors remains comparatively high, certainly compared to central government. And undermining that trust is an effective way to destabilize communities, which is why some people look to spread this kind of disinformation. So the guide emphasizes that councillors should expect to encounter it. Do not treat it as an anomaly, is the lesson there.
Yeah, precisely. And I think this is a key phrase. Disinformation thrives on emotion, speed, and uncertainty. One of the guide's strongest insights is that disinformation spreads not because it is convincing, but because it is emotionally charged. I think that's a very important point.
Yeah.
Anger, fear, and outrage do drive engagement. Councillors are encouraged, therefore, to recognise the emotional triggers behind viral posts and avoid being drawn into reactive exchanges that amplify the problem.
Yeah, and the guide also highlights the role of wait for this. This is a nuanced alliteration here. Algorithmic amplification.
I'm glad you
So
had to say that.
yeah, I know. But obviously we know what that means, don't we?
Mm,
Because we see that in terms of being refed what it is you're watching to re-emphasize that message. Closed online groups, anonymous accounts, AI generated content, and we know that that's getting increasingly difficult to spot. And it create the sort of all those factors makes the challenge of dealing with disinformation harder. And it also means that it spreads a lot faster. I mean, we talk about going viral, don't we? And that's
yeah,
the danger.
yeah. Helen, this guidance really nails it, doesn't it? I think
It
it's
does.
very, very insightful. The LGA stresses that councillors are not expected to become fact-checking machines. Instead, the guide encourages a strategic approach. So correct falsehoods when they relate to your work, your council, or public safety. Avoid amplifying harmful content by repeating it, and use only trusted channels to share accurate information. And of course, signpost to official sources rather than engaging in lengthy online debates. As the guidance says, the emphasis is on proportionate, calm, and credible responses.
Yeah, and a major theme is prevention because councillors can help build communities that are less vulnerable to disinformation by promoting transparency in decision making, strengthening relationships with local media, encouraging digital literacy, modeling respectful online behaviour, lead by example and be visible, accessible, and consistent.
All good advice. And the LGA acknowledges sadly, the personal toll disinformation can take. Councillors themselves may face online personal abuse, targeted harassment, reputation attacks, and coordinated campaigns.
Yeah, and this feeds into the civility in public life because councillors are encouraged to know their council's safety and reporting procedures, document incidents. I mean, that is a must. Document,
Yes.
document, document. Avoid engaging with abusive accounts. You don't need to,
Mm.
and seek support early.
Now, this is not about retreating from public life, but about staying safe and resilient in a challenging digital environment. So, on that basis, councillors are encouraged to work with council communications teams, monitoring officers, where necessary, the local police, community groups, and trusted local media.
Yeah, I mean, no single factor can counter disinformation alone, but I think the LGA's message is that coordinated, consistent messaging can significantly reduce its impact. Now, I realise we spent quite a lot of time covering that, but actually, I think it's incredibly important, and there's some really good bits in that
Exactly, yes. Great
guide,
timing.
100%. So do take a look. Now, there's a new duty for councils in respect of temporary accommodation, Dennis, isn't there?
Yes, there is. It's interesting. Councils are to have a new legal duty to notify schools, health visitors, and GPs when a child is placed in temporary accommodation. Now, the Department for Education has announced the introduction of this new legal duty for councils to notify schools when a child is placed, as I say, in temporary accommodation. And all of this is part of its child poverty strategy, which was launched on the 5th of December. The government said that the new legal duty, to be delivered through an amendment to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, will enable health and education providers to deliver, quote, a more joined-up approach to support children experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, meanwhile, the government said it will work with the NHS to end the practice of mothers with newborns being discharged into B&Bs or other forms of unsuitable housing, and end the unlawful placement of families in bed and breakfasts beyond the 6-week limit, which we know happens a lot. That's an interesting proposal because we already know the elderly often the difficulties of discharging into suitable care. So I mean, it seems the NHS struggles enough as it is. It's that's I'm not saying it's not a brilliant proposal. I'm just saying I'll be interested to see how they navigate that. The Department for Education has said in respect of this that to support this, the government is investing 8 million in emergency accommodation reduction pilots in 20 local authorities that have the highest use of bed and breakfast for homeless families. So I should imagine quite a few of those are going to be in London. Continuing, or any major city, continuing the programme for the next 3 years.
Yeah. Well, in England alone, more than 172,000 children, a shocking number, are living in temporary accommodation. Against this backdrop, the government has announced plans to provide £950 million through the 4th round of the Local Authority Housing Fund from April next year to deliver up to 5,000 homes for better temporary accommodation by 2030. And other interventions in the strategy include, first, more accessible childcare for working parents on universal credit, second, helping families to buy more affordable infant formula, and third, removal of the 2-child benefit cap, which has been widely reported.
It has. I mean, this goes back, doesn't it, to house building, availability of property, and sheer cost in cities of rent, which disproportionate to inflation and earnings. And it's no simple answer, but responding to the publication of the National Child Poverty Strategy, Councillor Dr. Wendy Taylor, she is the chair of the LGA's Health and Wellbeing Committee. She said that councils want to work with the government and partners to combat child poverty, and I think that's absolutely correct. Of course, councils do. It's just how they do it. She said that we're pleased this strategy recognises the importance of integrating local services, including housing, health and family support, to better meet the needs of disadvantaged children. Certainly will make a clearer picture amongst those 3 things, which I think is important. Going on, she said, we are also pleased to see national measures aimed at reducing in-work poverty and making it easier for parents to access childcare and progress in work, which will improve outcomes and alleviate pressures on local hardship support.
And she added, the renewed emphasis on prevention in key areas, including housing, social care, employment, support and health, is a positive step. Councils will continue to work closely with government to identify ways in which integration and service reform can enable earlier intervention in the underlying causes of disadvantage. However, she said, without additional investment in these services and a recognition that councils still face high levels of immediate demand in many acute services, it is hard, she said, to see how we will be able to achieve the step change that is needed to reverse current trends successfully.
Well, Children's Commissioner, who we've quoted before on the podcast, Dame Rachel D'Souza, she said that removing the 2-child limit is the single biggest opportunity to transform the lives of hundreds of thousands of children quickly. But alongside that headline, there's much to be positive about. She talks about investment in safe homes for families facing homelessness, support for those with more than 2 children, and stopping children from being forced to live in B&B accommodation for lengthy periods. And of course, these are all things she's previously called for. She also talked about, welcoming the improvement in the quality of temporary accommodation. She highlighted the fact that where some children live is absolutely shocking. Dickensian conditions, in fact, she referred to. But she said that crucially, a new legal requirement for healthcare and education services to be informed of these children's circumstances mean they should no longer be left to fend for themselves. Let's hope so.
And she added, if we are to end child poverty, not just reduce it, then we must continue to be ambitious for children's lives. I want to see, she said, additional practical steps taken across the country, like free bus travel for school-aged children, and automatically enrolling eligible children for free school meals, so none goes without. And a constant focus on improving the public services that children use by designing them to reflect their own experiences.
I think depending on where people live, I think people forget that not all like there are swathes of the country where
Mm,
bus travel is not free for children to get to
mm.
school, and certainly if you live in a rural part, actually that could be really expensive.
Yeah.
Um,
And those discrepancies shouldn't exist, should they really?
no, they shouldn't. It shouldn't be a postcode lottery. So, whilst we're looking at sort of renting of sorts, let's take a look at the Renters Reform
Yeah.
uh, Act in England. And this is taken from research in the House of Commons library, which we both love, don't we, Dennis?
Yes, we do. The Renters' Rights Act 2025 marks a significant overhaul of the private rented sector in over 3 decades. Receiving royal assent on the 27th of October, the Act delivers on major commitments in the 2024 Labour Party manifesto and revives much of the previous Renters' Reform Bill that fell before the 2024 general election.
Yeah, but this time the reforms are broader, I would say more ambitious,
Mm,
and they seem to be backed by a clear implementation roadmap. So for tenants, the Act promises greater security, fairness, and transparency. That's the intention of government. For landlords, it introduces new duties and accountabilities. And for local authorities, it represents a major expansion of investigatory and enforcement powers. So let's have a look at some of the key themes, Dennis, that are shaping this new era of renting.
yes, because at the heart of the Act is a fundamental shift. Assured short-hold tenancies are to be abolished, and with them, no-fault evictions under Section 21 of the Housing Act 1988. From the 1st of May next year, all private rented sector tenancies, new and existing, will convert to periodic assured tenancies with no end date. Tenants will gain far greater security, needing only to give 2 months' notice if they wish to leave. And landlords will still be able to regain possession, but only through reformed and expanded statutory grounds, each with clear notice periods and evidential requirements. Now, this is a move away from discretionary eviction and towards a more transparent, rules-based system.
Mm. Well, the Act introduces a suite of new protections designed to rebalance the relationship between landlords and tenants. So, because historically, the tenants were in a very, very strong position, weren't they, prior to
Mm,
the prior even before assured tenancies, and then we had this move, and now we seem to be going back.
mm.
Um, so what's going to happen? Well, rent increases will be limited to once per year with at least 2 months' notice. There's going to be a right for tenants to challenge above market rent increases at the first tier tribunal, although it was always possible to go to the tribunal on rental increases, I thought. Could be wrong, but I seem to
No, I
recall
think
that.
you're right.
Yeah, I think that was the case. There was a ban on, there's going to be a ban on rent in advance before signing a tenancy, because we know sometimes people are asked to give 6 months, and a cap of 1 month's rent up front thereafter. There will be a prohibition on rental bidding, preventing landlords from soliciting or accepting offers above the advertised rent. That's interesting. There's going to be a new right to request a pet, which landlords must consider and cannot unreasonably refuse. And of course, a ban on discrimination against tenants with children or those receiving benefits.
Yes. Now, two major structural reforms will reshape how the sector is regulated. First, there'll be a private rented sector ombudsman for the first time. All private landlords will be required to join a new ombudsman service expected to be operational in 2028. And it will have binding powers to order apologies, require information, mandate remedial action, and award compensation. This gives tenants a clear accessible route to redress without the need for going to court.
And there'll be a new national private rented sector database as well. That's going to roll out from late 2026. And this is designed to bring together key information for tenants to make informed choices, landlords to understand and demonstrate compliance, and for local authorities to target enforcement where it's most needed.
And the Act also extends the Decent Home Standard to the private rented sector for the first time, giving councils the power to enforce minimum property conditions. And it also applies AWAB's law, requiring landlords to fix serious hazards within a set time frame. Tenants will have new rights to challenge unsafe conditions, signalling a shift towards proactive, health-based housing regulation.
Yeah, and for councils, we talked about the strengthening of regulatory capacity. So from, I believe, the 27th of December of this year, authorities gain new investigatory powers, including property inspections, document demands, and access to third-party data. And civil penalties also are expanded, rent repayment orders are widened, and doubled in maximum value, actually.
Yeah.
And repeat offenders must receive the maximum penalty. So councils will also be required to report on this enforcement activity.
Yeah. Now, the plan is that the Act will be rolled out in 3 phases. During phase 1, which is December until May next year, there'll be new investigatory powers for councils. The new tenancy regime begins on the 1st of May next year. Section 21 will be abolished, as we've mentioned. Rent rules, pet requests, anti-discrimination measures and rental bidding. The rental bidding ban will come into force, and there'll be transition rules for existing Section 21 notices.
Yeah. Phase 2, that's going to be around late next year, 2026, all the way through to 2028. So that's a 2-year rollout of the national database and also the establishment of the Ombudsman Service. Sorry, I need to cover phase 3, don't I? Phase 3 runs from the end of that. So from 2028 onwards, that's the implementation of the Decent Home Standard. And then there will be consultation on extending AWAB's law. So that's where we're at with that, Dennis.
Right. Well, Helen, I think we'll stick with housing, but in this case, homelessness. Homelessness has returned to the centre of political debate in Westminster, and not as a passing headline. Over the past week, Parliament has seen a flurry of activity signalling a shift in how the government intends to tackle one of the most persistent social crises of the last decade. For those of us who work in governance, law and public policy, the developments are worth more than just a cursory glance. They hint at deeper structural changes that could reshape statutory duties for years to come.
Yeah, so on the 11th of December, the government unveiled its new national plan to end homelessness, a cross-government strategy backed by 3.5 billion over the next 3 years. The plan was formally introduced to Parliament through a written statement by Alison McGovern, MP, who's of course the Minister for Local Government and Homelessness. So the strategy sets out several headline commitments. I actually watched Alison deliver that in the Commons. So let's just have a look at those. They're halving long-term rough sleeping by 2029, a renewed focus on prevention, aiming to intervene before homelessness occurs, ending the unlawful use of B&Bs for families. Well, we've already just talked about that. Reducing reliance on poor quality temporary accommodation and embedding the voices of people with lived experience into policy design.
Yeah, all good stuff. The written statement did not shy away from acknowledging the scale of the challenge. Rough sleeping and temporary accommodation use have more than doubled since 2010, and local authorities are struggling under the weight of rising demand, shrinking supply, and increasingly complex cases. Just a day before the plan was published, McGovern made a striking, remarkable public commitment that she would consider it a personal failing if families were still being placed in B&Bs by the end of this Parliament.
Well, it's a bold pledge, isn't it? And interesting, because when you look at our previous item, the target was to ensure that no family stayed beyond the 6-week limit. This has completely gone the other way, as it just won't happen, full stop. Anyone familiar with the statutory framework, particularly the Housing Act 1996, and the Homelessness Reduction Act 2017, and I think the Children Act 1989, knows that B&B use is already tightly constrained in law. Yet the reality on the ground tells a different story. And we know this. Councillors have been forced into impossible positions, balancing legal duties against a chronic shortage of suitable accommodation. And the minister's statement signals a political willingness to confront this tension head on. Whether the system can deliver on that ambition is another question entirely, Dennis.
Oh, it is. Unsurprisingly, the sector's response has been mixed. Charities and frontline organisations have welcomed the renewed focus and the scale of investment, but many argue that £3.5 billion will not stretch far enough, given the depth of the crisis. And a number of concerns have been raised, and these include the record numbers of households that are in temporary accommodation. Then there's the spiralling cost of nightly paid placements. And there's also the need for long-term supported housing. And finally, there's the fragility of local authority finances, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, that, and we can't understate that or underplay it. But parliamentary debate has echoed these themes, with MPs across the House pressing the government on how the plan will translate into practical, sustainable change. I think for those of us working in governance, statutory interpretation, and local government leadership, this is more than a policy announcement. I think it marks a shift towards treating homelessness as a cross-departmental statutory issue, not simply a housing one. Dennis.
Exactly. And finally, from us for this year, from the Grapevine, keeping in with the festive season as we try to do, a story that celebrates public service at Christmas. And as you know, Helen, we both like to round off the year with a story that illustrates the dedication of people working in public services that go the extra mile. We should, of course, celebrate this all year round. But this year, the story is about a runaway reindeer. Indeed, a reindeer called Buddy sparked a huge search operation after he went on the run from a Christmas celebration.
Yeah, well, armed police officers, the Coast Guard, and members of the Royal Marines, no less, were called in to track him down after he fled Santa's enchanted forest in Formby, Merseyside, and local authorities in the area were on full alert. But Buddy's winter escape, and I love his name, obviously Buddy the Elf, it soon wore him out, and Santa's exhausted key worker was found actually fast asleep in nearby sand dunes.
Pity it wasn't snowing.
Yeah.
A relieved Steve Howard, owner of Santa's Enchanted Forest, said Buddy had just become overexcited and had decided to stretch his legs, adding, quote, I think he was just doing a trial run for Christmas Eve. Mer- Merseyside Police said it began receiving reports that the reindeer had gone missing, and worried he might end up in a nearby river, the force called in teams from the Coast Guard to help find him.
Yeah, well, Buddy is actually from North Wales, and
Hmm.
he was visiting in Merseyside, I suspect. He was later discovered on Formby Beach using, get this, thermal binoculars.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, and whilst a lifeboat quad bike team stepped in to shepherd him into the dunes. Now, monitored by a police drone. I mean, this is quite some operation.
It is.
An exhausted Buddy, and he's probably tired from running on the sand because that is exhausting. He finally laid down to rest as a vet administered some sedatives in the early hours of Sunday, and then he was placed in a trailer and returned to his stable.
Now, Steve said Buddy is a young reindeer who is full of beans, loves children, and enjoys them hand feeding him moss. And going on, he said, I'm grateful to the public services for helping to get him, and I want to say thanks to all of them. After his unexpected seaside adventure, he is enjoying some well-earned rest in his cosy stable and will be taking it easy for the rest of the year. Helen, being one down, Santa this year may take a little longer on his delivery round. What do you
Well,
think?
well, potentially. There's bound to be a stand in there, though, Dennis. But that's a lovely, happy story,
Yes.
actually, in the end. So that's nice. And on that note, that's it for the last edition of the podcast in 2025. It's just left to Dennis and I to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. The weekly Grapevine podcast will be back in the new year from the 12th of January, I believe.
Yep.
Brilliant. But until then, do take care. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. And a Merry Christmas.